Mayor, we are good to go.
Thanks, Scott. All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our June 14th, 2021 Burlington City Council work session. Due to the continuing coronavirus pandemic, this meeting is again being held via our Zoom platform and is being streamed live at the City of Burlington's YouTube page at youtube.com/COBNC. Please note this meeting is being recorded. If anyone is having any technical or connection difficulties at any point throughout this meeting, we ask that you contact our Community Engagement Manager, John Vernon, at 336-513-5440. He can assist you with any support questions you have. For staff comments or to address council at the appropriate time in the meeting, we ask that you use the raise hand feature in your Zoom window or *9 if you're joining us via phone. That will alert us at the appropriate time that you wish to speak, and we'll call on you as appropriate. As a preliminary matter, I am Mayor Ian Baltutis, and I'd like to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on this agenda are present and can hear me. Members present, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Mayor Pro Tem Kathy Hikes.
Here.
City Council Member Jim Butler.
Here.
Council Member Bob Ward.
Here.
Council Member Harold Owen.
Here.
Very good. Staff presenting, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. City Manager Hardin Watkins.
Here.
City Attorney David Huffman. You with us, David?
Here.
Very good. Interim City Clerk Beverly Smith.
Here.
Assistant City Manager Nolan Kirkman.
Here.
Principal Planner Annie Lester. Director of Planning and Transportation Mike Nunn.
Here.
Planning Manager Conrad Omedo.
Here.
Principal Planner Jamie Lawson.
Here.
And Transportation Engineer and Operations Manager Brian Tennant.
Here.
Very good. Thank you, everyone. This time we'll begin our agenda with item A, the RAISE grant for Renew Maple Avenue Corridor Plan, and we'll recognize Principal Planner Andy Lester. Welcome, Andy.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and members of Council. On April 13, 2021, the United States Department of Transportation announced the federally administered RAISE Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity Grant Opportunity. This is formerly known as the BUILD grant from years past. The RAISE grant opportunity includes $1 billion available nationwide, with eligible projects receiving grant awards up to $25 million. Since Burlington is a federally designated urbanized area with a population of less than 200,000 people, and the Renew Maple Avenue Corridor Plan project is considered to be located in a rural area, Burlington is eligible up for 100% RAISE grant funding without a local match, which is nice. In partnership with Tool Design Group, staff would like to submit an application for the RAISE grant. The application deadline is July 12th, 2021. This is a continuation of an ongoing efforts to secure grant monies in order to implement the Renew Maple Avenue Corridor Plan. And that was adopted by City Council on June 18, 2019. The RAISE grant is essentially the same grant opportunity as the prior BUILD grant, but with the new title. The city has previously pursued the BUILD grant, and staff recommends approval of a resolution to allow submittal for the 2021 RAISE grant. The pursuit of the RAISE grant represents a continuation of ongoing efforts to implement the Renew Maple Avenue Corridor Plan. The city's most recent effort at implementation of the plan established the Maple Avenue Facade Grant Program. With $100,000 allocated to the facade program, it is aimed at encouraging and assisting businesses and property owners within Maple Avenue corridor to restore and improve the appearance of their storefronts. But as we continue forward with the RAISE application, staff has received 15 letters of support from a spectrum of legislators, members of the business community, educational institutions, and community partners to pursue the grant and continue implementing the plan. If I can, I would like to share, let's see. No, I'll bring it up in a minute. My apologies. But tonight, Ernie Bowman is here to discuss the updated RAISE application. So Ernie, if you'd like to share your screen.
Welcome back, Ernie.
Thank you. And let me get my screen shared here. Good evening, Mayor and members of Council. It is a pleasure to be back with you. Good to see all of you. It's been a little bit. Very happy to be working again with the city on this RAISE grant opportunity, which Andy mentioned is just the new name for build. In most aspects, the grant is very similar as far as the criteria. There are a couple of areas that have been updated, and I'll share those with you in particular. The grant application itself is a 30-page document. I do not intend to walk you through every page of that tonight, but I will try to hit the high points. You can see on the shared screen the cover here, and key areas. We are once again asking for $24.9 million, which it does have a maximum of a $25 million ask. We do not require a match, as Andy mentioned, so that is very good. I'm going to just skip ahead a little bit. The project scope is the same as we have presented to you before. It's essentially what we had sort of called the first phase of Maple Avenue. So it goes from the interstate up to Anthony Street toward downtown, moving north. So it does include the Chapel Hill intersection, as well as the infrastructure components of the catalyst sites down by the interstate. The selection criteria, well, actually, let me share with you. There's the project location map, so that gives you a clear understanding of what portion we are submitting at this time. And then this is the grant funding breakdown. Again, we're showing a total project cost of $26.7 million, a raise request of $24.9 million, and then what we're calling other non-federal funds. That includes monies that NCDOT has already dedicated to the intersection there at NC 54, and also the partnership that New Leaf Society has pledged through landscaping and landscape design in the first 3 years of implementation. The selection criteria is what the federal government or USDOT primarily bases their selection off of. And through our 2 previous tries at the build grant, we have gotten really good debriefs from USDOT, which has allowed us to continue to refine and perfect our selection criteria. One of the main things that we've tried to do is refocus that to put the bulk of our information into the selection criteria. That was one guidance measure that we heard on this last go round, as well as there are 2 selection criteria that while the names have not changed, kind of the basis behind them have. And so one of those is environmental sustainability. While previously that had a very kind of a broad range of environmental areas that they were concerned about, now it has a heavier focus on climate change in particular. So we have refined our narrative to focus in on climate change as best we can, including stormwater quality as a key area of that. And then another selection criteria that has, the title is still quality of life, but it has changed as well. It has a strong focus on racial equity. And so we have really tried to emphasize the equity pieces of this project. This project has always had a strong equity focus to it. So we're just trying to pull those things forward. And one of the things that the grant talks about is what they define as areas of persistent poverty. And the major census tract, which is actually this, I don't know if you can see my cursor or not. Let me see, I'll use the hand. This one here is actually what is defined as an area of persistent poverty, and that's 80% of our project area. So that's another key area as well. And then I guess the final thing I will mention to you, I'll just skip ahead here, is the benefit cost analysis. This is another major piece of this. This has not changed dramatically from previous submittals, but what I will mention to you is that we do have a benefit cost ratio of 1.04, and kind of 1.00 is the magic number for this. They want to make sure that they're at least getting a complete return on their investment, which is a 1. So anything 1 or above is looked on favorably. Obviously, the higher the better, but we feel good about being at least at that 1. And there's a lot of areas that we're not able to quantify at this time just because we haven't done that level of study. But that provides a pretty good summary. I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Ernie. Any questions from council regarding this?
One quick question, Mayor. What's the time frame, Ernie, on this?
Sure. These are due July the 12th. And then they're expecting to have awards in November.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
Other council?
Ernie, this is Harold Owen. I have a colleague with the League of Municipalities named Julie Metz, who was successful at getting one of these grants when she was in Goldsboro, working with their downtown redevelopment. I spoke to her this morning, and she said, I asked her if she would be willing to speak to anyone to help with any advice on her successes, and she said she'd be glad to talk to anyone from the organization. She's a very sharp young lady, and of course, she said the name of the grant changes by every administration from Tiger,
Right.
to Bill, to where we are now. So, but obviously, her comments was it was a substantial amount of hours put in to pull this off.
Sure. And well, Councilmember Owen, if you would be willing to share her contact information, I'd be more than happy to reach out to her. We're always looking for any insight that we can get. We have, while we have not hit the ball out of the park for you folks as yet, we have on several others over the past few years. And so we love gleaning any of that information that we can get. So be happy to talk with her.
I'll send you that.
Yeah, I have a question too. There was a comment in some of the background that said that there was blight and crime in the area, and I wondered if we had any data to back that up, and if that would not be helpful in reading this grant.
Absolutely. What I would say is when we put together the original corridor plan back in 2019, we absolutely had that data. I don't know if that's something that we could get some updated data from the police department on. That would be very, very helpful, and we'd be happy to include, the actual statistics for the area.
Other council questions? Ernie, I know we've submitted this a couple times through Build. And I know we've learned along that process. Are there some things that you've seen us do in the last couple of years that have helped kind of better position this project? And are there any other areas of opportunity for us to continue to help make sure this grant and this project is best positioned for success?
Sure. No, I absolutely think that we have bettered our position. As it was mentioned, each administration changes it up just a little bit. And so one of the things this year that we kind of counseled a lot of our clients that were going after these grants is not to start too early this time, because you didn't know till we saw the notice of funding opportunity, we didn't know what would change. So again, we couldn't have predicted necessarily the changes that occurred to it. So what I would say though, is if we are not successful this year, and if the city determines they want to continue, to seek it, I do think we would then be in a better position to start sooner, because we now have seen the Biden administration's notice of funding opportunity for the RAISE grant. We now know what their priorities are, and so you could start earlier. Again, if we had done that this time, I think we would have probably guessed a little wrong maybe on some of the things, and it wouldn't have been wise to start early. But again, I think now that we know what this administration is focusing on, typically that doesn't change year to year in the same administration. So I think we would be in a position to start sooner. And what we would do at that time, I would highly recommend, as was mentioned, more specificity is excellent. So any real detailed analysis that can be done to add more statistics, more data would be very beneficial.
Very good. Thank you. Any other council questions regarding this? All right, so this is, I believe, already on our consent agenda for tomorrow. So without any objections, we'll go ahead and vote on this tomorrow. All
Thank
right.
you, Council.
Andy, anything else you need from us today?
Just thank you for making it easy for my first time here.
Very good.
I appreciate it.
We're a nice bunch of folks to work with.
Indeed.
Ernie,
Hey, guys.
If I could just take a second and forgive me for not doing it before Andy spoke. He's not new to us anymore, but we're very, very glad he's here. Andy was hired as the principal planner for comprehensive planning, long-term planning. And this is one he's taken in, as part of that, but he's also been very helpful in helping us with just the day-to-day permit process, has a depth of experience in that from the city of Greensboro. And also an interesting fact, Andy was an intern in Burlington when Destination Burlington was first created. So just glad to have him back all the way around, and look forward to him working with us and you more going forward.
good to know those plans are in good hands and won't get dusty on a shelf somewhere.
No,
Very
they won't.
good.
Ernie, thanks for joining us again.
Thank you. Y'all have a good evening.
Thank you. All right, with that, we will go ahead and move on to item B on our agenda, which is annexation requests. This time I'll recognize Principal Planner Jamie Lawson. Welcome, Jamie.
Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. Staff received a petition for voluntary annexation for several properties: 0 Melrose Drive, 2272 Durham Street, 2257 Melrose Drive, and 1734 Sharp Road, along with associated utility requests for these properties. All of the requests are for water and sewer, except for Sharp Road, which is only for water. Pursuant to the city's adopted utility connection service procedures, each of these requests were forwarded and approved to the city manager and now are in front of the city council. At this time, staff is recommending that council defer annexation of each of these items and reserve the right to consider the petitions in the future per the terms of the voluntary annexation petition. Pursuant to City Code 40.40, we ask that you add these items to tomorrow night's consent agenda. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thanks, Jamie. Any questions from council regarding these 4 items?
Are any other properties adjacent to this that are under the same kind of annexation long-term? I know we did something a little bit north of there, but I'm not sure if that was an annexation request or not.
Yes, there have been several requests in this general vicinity, some of which involved multiple properties all by the same owner. If you so choose to have this on for tomorrow night's consent agenda, I'll be happy to share a map that shows each of the properties. I don't have anything prepared at this time pertaining to that, but these are all individual requests. And tonight's requests are all for residential properties and residential zones.
And those maps, there's some maps in our agenda packet. These are all different owners. Is that right, Jamie?
There may be some of the same property owners, but they are individual properties.
Okay.
It seems, there are property owners who purchase properties within the same vicinity and then put in these requests for the individual lots.
Okay. Any other questions from council regarding these? Any objection to these being included on tomorrow's agenda? All right. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we will move on to item C on our agenda, boards and commissions reports. This time we'll recognize Planning Manager Conrad O'Meadow and again, Principal Planner Jamie Lawson.
Good afternoon or good evening, Mayor and members of council. Let's see, we got 3 items. I'll go ahead and start with the first item here, and then we'll let Jamie pick it up the next item. Let me just share my screen. Pardon me.
Conrad, do you want me to do the zoning one first?
Oh yeah, go ahead, sir. Mhm.
Yeah, that'd be, then knock that one out.
Yep.
Let me share my screen while you're getting those ready. We do have a rezoning request. If I can share my screen. There we go. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Can everybody see the map that's on the screen?
Yep.
Okay. I'll just pull it back here, give you a little bit of location. Before I get started, this is the interstate, obviously, Maple Avenue going south away from downtown. These three parcels was being requested. There's a current Shell station here, as well as a BP gas station. It requests approximately 1.49 acres of these combined three parcels from medium density residential to general business. They are located on the southeast corner of Maple Avenue and Hampton Road. The comprehensive land use plan calls for the area to be neighborhood commercial, and the proposed zoning is consistent with that land use plan recommendation. And it's also compatible with the existing commercial and residential in the area. At the May 24th meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously approved the request, and staff also recommends approval of this request. Tomorrow evening, Mr. Curtis Little, the applicant, will be with us if you have any other questions, and I'll be glad to answer any tonight.
Very good. Any questions from council regarding these three parcels tonight? Mike, what's currently on these parcels?
There is one home here, I believe, on this parcel. This one is vacant. Don't believe there's anything behind here, but it's all three parcels for about 1.5 acres, 1.49. But there is a home here.
It's a good corner. It really is for development.
It matches up with what we're trying to do,
Yeah.
neighborhood commercial.
Sure.
Good, compatible.
Is Lawndale a paved street? Do you know, Mike? I feel like
I believe it.
there was gravel or it was in really rough condition, but it's
Possible.
Yeah.
I can check and see.
Yeah. Any other questions regarding this? All right.
Thank you.
What have we got next?
Next, we'll have Jamie Lawson, principal planner. She'll go ahead and present the next two items.
Good evening again. If I can go ahead and share my screen.
Should have that ability. There we go. We've got a screen coming in.
So the first item is a request to designate 1.8 acre portion of the Aurora Cotton Mills finishing plant. This is located at 741 East Webb Street, and the request is to designate it as a local landmark designation. The property is referenced in the Alamance County tax identification numbers 136857, and the applicant is Clocken Properties, who are also the developers from a hosiery. Ms. Heather Fernback of Fernback History Services prepared a landmark designation application and report for the property, which was forwarded to the State Historic Preservation Office in March of 2021. The state reviewed the report and provided a recommendation in favor of the landmark designation, and that was in April 2021. The Historic Preservation Commission recommended approval of the landmark designation at their meeting on May 11th, 2021. And this recommendation is consistent with the comprehensive plans, goals pertaining to the traditional residential future land use designation, as well as the character and identity goals. At their May 24th, 2021 meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission also recommended unanimously to approval of the landmark designation, and staff recommends approval consistent with the statement option number 1. To date, no public comments have been received by staff. And I also would like to say that the applicant is on the call if there's any questions pertaining to the application or the site. At this time, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Very good. Any questions from council?
Just a comment about how thorough this report was and how fascinating the history of the textiles in, I mean, I've read some of that, but this was it was very interesting. And I don't know, I'm glad that somebody else has that job, because just the technical piece of it would just, I think I'd hang myself if I had to do that. I appreciate the person who wrote it.
Kathy, to say it's very thorough is an understatement, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Any other
You
questions?
know, that brings up an interesting comment, though, is you know, as a city, as we see textiles change so radically here in the last really 20 years, are we recording, or can we record some of this information as a history of these facilities to have stored for our own the history of our community? Because, like you said, it's pretty fascinating.
Well, I can say that the landmark designation report, extremely thorough, as you mentioned, will be on file here in the planning department, and we can also see where it make sense to have it as a resource available to the public. Maybe we can look and see about putting it at the library or other places that might be accessible.
Library.
So,
Fantastic.
Jamie, are you volunteering to be our historian then?
I'll do my best. I'm sure there are others that are also, well suited for that position. And I don't think it's a job that one person could essentially do themselves. But yeah, I find it very interesting and happy to assist in any way I can.
Well, thank you.
Any other council comments or questions on this property? Based on what we saw happen over at Mayhosiery Mill, it's exciting to see movement on this property, especially looking at the neighborhood business district over on East Davis. I think this is really an exciting movement to bring the life back to the community that they used to see there, and put new residents next to existing businesses and opportunities for future businesses. Appreciate staff's work on this. All right, what have you got for us next?
Okay, let me see if I can share my screen on this side. Okay, so the next item is pertaining to the architectural, also relative to architectural theme here. The architectural and historic design standards. Staff is recommending changes to the architectural and historic standards. These are standards that are applicable only to properties that are in the local historic district. Essentially, the only change that we're seeking at this time is to replace the word guidelines with standards throughout the entire report. And this is to be consistent and compliant with Chapter 160D and our Unified Development Ordinance. There are no other changes to the document. The Historic Preservation Commission recommended unanimous approval of these modifications at their May 11th, 2021 meeting. The changes are consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. The Planning and Zoning Commission also recommended in favor of the changes at their May 24th, 2021 meeting, excuse me. We have not received any public comment on this item, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. It's a pretty simple request, and I've put up on the screen. If you can you see the text for the document?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so essentially you can just see where we've gone through the entire report and did some track changes. That's essentially it.
And so this just helps unify the language across the documents, correct?
Correct.
Very good. Council, any questions, comments? All right. Thanks, Jamie.
You're welcome.
All right. What do we got next?
We have a report from Traffic Commission. Brian Tennant is here, I believe. Brian, if you want to go ahead.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Okay. All right.
There we
All
go.
right.
It's coming up. We've got it now.
Perfect. So BDOT received a request from citizens to install no parking signs along Shaw Street from Gunn to Short. When we did an evaluation, we realized that the entirety of Shaw Street from Gunn to Richmond Avenue should be signed as no parking due to the narrow width. And I'll stop here for a second to try to help illustrate this. So Gunn to Short is right in this section, and you can see, I'll zoom in a little bit, it's a little less than 14 feet, and it pretty much has this cross section all the way going out to Richmond Avenue. So between fire as well as police departments, we were able to get support, and we went to the May 27th Traffic Commission meeting to where the vote was unanimous. There was no public comments during this Traffic Commission meeting. And at this time, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions from council? Do we have any indication of any hardship that this may impose on residents, or do most people have sufficient driveway and parking pad space?
So they do have sufficient driveways. As part of this study, we also looked at a couple of the other streets along here, Chandler Avenue, as well as Richmond, just to see what the compliance rates were as far as looking at no parking along those streets as well, to make sure people were adequately using their driveways. And that seemed to be the case as well, as people were using their driveways.
Okay.
So are Chandler and Richmond no parking streets as well?
So not all of Chandler is in Richmond. It kind of varied throughout. So I made notes on there, depending on where it was, as well as trying to look at different lengths of cross sections throughout the area to just see if there's any consistency as well.
Any other questions? All right, thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
I believe that concludes our staff reports. Any further staff reports?
I'm sorry, Mayor. I do have one more item.
No, you have two items. My apologies.
No
It's not
worries.
two signs, it's two items.
Go ahead. All right. Sorry. So my next item, I'll just go ahead and roll right into it, was a request for a stop sign at Cottage Place and Berkeley Road, which is just in this area. And that's also to remain consistent with the stop sign request that also went into the area as well.
Was this one, I know we did a bunch of stop signs at non-controlled intersections a while back. I think Mike had presented those. Was this one that just kind of slipped through, or?
Yes, sir. So we do have one right here at Berkeley and Regent Park, as well as Woodhaven and Berkeley. And it was just one that was missed that staff brought to my attention.
Okay. Appreciate you finding that one. Council, any other questions or comments on this? All right.
That's all we have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. All right, that concludes our regular agenda items. City Manager, anything else you want to add?
No, Mayor, I have nothing to report this evening.
Harden, sorry to interrupt. Harden, did you want to give a CTP update? You want me to speak to that real quick?
Okay, sure. Yeah. Go ahead and take it from here, Nolan.
Yeah, you mentioned that this past week. Real quick, you may recall the construction training program was not funded as part of the fiscal year 21-22 annual action plan. And so staff was looking at, ways to try to figure out ways to help support that. As you recall, those funds are matched by the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency and comes back in terms of funds that we can use towards affordable housing efforts in the city. So while we don't have anything specific to give you right now, I can tell you that it appears, and Michael and Mike Nunn were working on this, that there may be some potential funding coming for CDBG through the ARPA funds. And so if those funds come through in the next few months, unless we hear anything different, staff would proceed with bringing back some type of budget amendment that would provide some funds substantially for the CTP construction training program request.
Thank you, Nolan. Council, any questions regarding that?
That's great. Thanks.
All right, Council, any questions, other items that we need to bring up this evening?
Mr. Mayor, I would ask that the city council go into a closed session.
Before that, I have a couple items that I want to ask questions on.
Sure, that'd be fine.
All right, I just want to make sure other council members didn't have any other items. So I know we've got boards and commissions, we've got the applications in front of council, and I would ask the folks to review those over the next couple weeks leading into our next meeting. I did want to see if staff might be able to bring us a list of any boards and commissions that we have enabled by any of our city documents that we are not currently utilizing. It's my understanding that I think we have a bike ped commission that is written in. And in kind of looking at some of our strategic planning and some of what we're looking at with now Link Transit and with traffic and then the initiatives we're doing with greenways, it seems like there might be some justification for looking at transit as a more comprehensive system as opposed to subdividing the pieces off to these councils or commissions. And so I wanted to kind of see, well, one, where's bike ped? And then two, I'd be interested to kind of see staff's thoughts as well as council's thoughts about what if transportation became a singular committee? Because bike ped feeds into Link Transit, which also feeds into when you make a traffic change, that impacts kind of how it all goes together. So instead of subdividing these things off and trying to re-coordinate them, what might it look like if we had a more comprehensive singular transportation commission in the future? And then the other piece to that is just that, are there any other commissions like bike ped that are out there that are recommended or written in that we just aren't currently utilizing? Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me because sometimes consolidation of these commissions, I believe, may give more credibility in the long run.
Yeah, I think it helps especially the citizens who are volunteering on these, take a more holistic focus. When you're saying, when we make this traffic decision, whether it's a speed bump or a speed limit change, how does it impact bike ped safety? Or how does it make this a better route to get to a bus stop, or like factors?
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah.
We can certainly look into the ordinances on that and report back.
Cool. Yeah, I don't think it needs to interfere with our current boards and commissions appointments, but I think it's something where we can kind of look at it hopefully in the next couple months and use it as a rubric as we go forward. See if there's anything that we're currently enabled to have as a board or commission that we should bring up or unify, especially if we have any shortages of applicants.
Will do.
I hear you say that you're going to delay boards and commissions being appointed to future meetings. I thought that was up before the end of June.
Maybe I missed that. Do we have that? Do council members feel ready to go over that at tomorrow's council meeting?
I've started, but to be honest, I've hit some dead ends. We really, I was talking to John earlier today, and we had sort of an unusual number that did not ask to be reappointed, number one. And number two, the application pool is we have few applicants. And I don't know, we started through it and I made some suggestions, but I don't know, I'll be ready, to try to fill all of the open vacancies. At least I don't feel like I'll be able to. I don't know what the rest of you may think. It may, obviously too, under the ordinance, those currently serving will serve until their successors are appointed, or we could just go ahead and appoint, who, the suggested nominees now, if you want to. But I know I'm having trouble because of, because of the two factors I mentioned.
Territorial positions seem to be the problem.
Okay. Other council thoughts on how ready you are? Obviously, 4th of July holiday means that our first and only council meeting in July will be the council session on the 20th, and then our work session on the 19th.
Kathy, what was your comment there? I'm sorry, I missed that.
That the places that I had trouble filling in with anybody was extraterritorial positions on the Board of Adjustment and the planning and zoning. But
Yeah.
I was able to find people that seem qualified for the rest of them.
Yeah, I think Board of Adjustment is, if I'm not mistaken, is losing a couple of veteran members, are they not?
Yes, they are. I think 3 or 4.
Yeah, and that's a well, Bob and David can speak to that as well as I, but that's a tough commission to bring a number of new people in at one time.
How much work are they having now? I've talked to a few of those that are departing, and the consensus or feedback I'm getting is that the UDO has really helped streamline things to a point that there's not a lot of items coming up. Is there anything to that, Nolan? Or
Mike, do you want to unmute and speak to that? Some I know you're.
Sure.
I know we've had a number of meetings here in the last few months, but or the numbers now compared to.
Yeah, we've continued having meetings virtually and having items. The depth of those items, Mr. Butler, is not as, conditions and all that, but we've had variances. We've had several rezonings, as you've all seen, but they're not to that depth. But Board of Adjustment has had a handful, not as many. That's based on variances and appeals. But that somewhat statement is true. The UDO has changed the review process because, the work you all did and the stakeholders did is we put a lot of quality into our UDO standards that are now required. So that process has changed. We're still having a meeting, but maybe not the level of intensity that would be appropriate. Yes.
okay, thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're saying, Mike, then is that, and I'm not sure how many positions are open in the Board of Adjustment, but you believe that is there filled with new people, that there's a transition there that it's not might be quite as difficult as it's been in the past?
I think they are two different boards. The Board of Adjustment, as was mentioned, is a very difficult board.
Yes.
It's P&Z is a little bit different, but Board of Adjustment is more of, we tried to train them and almost to a legal standpoint of what their abilities are. And there's testimony and certain things that have to be done on every case. So that's a learning process, that staff depends on those members to gain. P&Z is one where a lot of, staff input, recommendations, and guidance can be provided. It's more of a legislative process. The Board of Adjustment is one that, really depends on their ability to hear testimony, understand the standards, understand what's being requested. So, Board of Adjustment, we are losing, I believe, all of those members, and it's a position and a board that's takes some time to to not only get the book knowledge, but also understand how the meetings flow and how you approve things and disapprove things. So I can understand why there may not be as many applicants for a Board of Adjustment position, if you will.
Mike, why don't you talk briefly about what we talked about earlier about how to bridge that gap with some training?
Oh, definitely. We're looking, school government is something I looked at, a couple of years ago when I stepped into the position, is just a refresher every year to bring in training for both P&Z and the Board of Adjustments, as they do have different responsibilities. And that's been impacted by COVID, but we talked, possibly look at maybe another source to see if they're doing, especially for Board of Adjustment, that can be done maybe by another source than school of government. But school of government, we would lean on them heavily to help us annually, in my mind, if not more, but we will need that heavily for the Board of Adjustments coming up.
I think that's a really key item. And for any of our boards and commissions is to have staff identify kind of weaknesses in the board or opportunities for further training, since these are volunteer citizen boards. Folks with a passion for the topic, but they may not have the full knowledge base. So anytime we can empower them to be higher functioning members of the board, that's wonderful.
And as you know, I mean, to give them, some credibility and support, is our P&Z and Board of Adjustment. It's sometimes challenging and debates, and you're not making everyone happy. So it's sometimes an uncomfortable position.
And the better prepared they are, the easier it makes our job, because they give us better citizen feedback before.
Exactly.
Mike, back to the Board of Adjustment is with the turnover at. I don't recall this ever being this much of a turnover of veteran people at one time. It's been a while anyway. And obviously training is important. And I'm going to ask this to David and Bob, if you could chime in here too. Should our attorney's office have any presence with this process of at least, going through the beginning of this transition? We're losing the chairman, are we not? We're losing some really key people on that Board of Adjustment.
And don't forget Historic Commission as well. They're quasi judicial and have a similar format. We're losing some of those as well.
Right. Well, yeah, quasi judicial positions here, and that's a little different. I don't know. It's a lot to ask a new member to come on board and first meeting. And obviously, how many do you have on Board of Adjustment that's going to be veteran members?
I believe today we discussed one. Conrad, was it the one person? What's his name?
Bob Giles is one.
Reappointment.
I believe there's just one.
Yeah. Actually,
Maybe Eric Grant also.
I think you're losing all of them with the exception of 2 members, are you not?
I thought it might be 2. I thought it was just 1. But yes, the majority of them are gone. The experienced ones are not asking for reappointment.
We were Mr. Owen, we were in a conversation earlier today pertaining to a particular issue and got to talking about this with Conrad and Mike and Nolan. The key here is that on an annual basis to try bring people up to speed, as well as bring them the latest cases that have come down, if there have been cases that have come down, to keep them educated. I see a role that this office could play, a larger role. I've actually had a conversation with Mr. Ward about that in the last 6 months or so, and we'd probably like to discuss that with you in the next month or 2.
Well, I admit I tried to recruit a couple of guys back, and I failed miserably. I think they were I think they'd been on it for a while, and they just simply was worn out or needed to do other things in life, and they were good members too.
Yeah, Traffic Commission and PTAC is similar. It's just I don't know the answer.
A lot of people are worn out after this past year. So I know attrition for multiple different organizations around the city are struggling.
Yeah, we were having issues with quorums even before COVID. I mean, it was sort of that trend, trying to get people to attend the meeting. So
I think I'm curious kind of on Board of Adjustment and any board, as we shift the way we do things like UDO. I'd be curious to get staff's feedback at a future meeting on how that shifts the role and scope of some of those boards, because if it sort of reduces the workload of the board to the point where members participating don't feel the impact of their participation, then I think there's a worthwhile conversation to have about, do we need to reset the scope or the role of the board to make that a more functional, contributing entity? Does that make sense?
Well, it does, Mayor. I wonder if, as our society changes, as we see in some other areas, or we just simply are not as much as a volunteer organization or a volunteer population to get involved in these type of services or not. And that's.
I think there's still a desire to volunteer and serve, but people want to meaningfully see the impact of their service. And so to make sure that the opportunities we're creating are clear, and that they allow people that opportunity to be effective and apply their skills.
Well, Board of Adjustment is no fun. Let's be honest. And P&Z obviously can be quite stressful. So it's I think that might make that those two boards could be challenging.
Yeah, and I know we've in the past had a lot of interest in P&Z, but very few open seats. Is there any way, John, maybe to look through some of the previous pools of applicants and see if we have any of those folks who may have dropped off out of the pool and maybe worth reaching out to from 3, 4, 5 years ago?
Yes, I can certainly do that.
Okay.
Problem is not a dearth of applicants, from what I could see. It's that we don't have the names of some people from the extraterritorial areas. I've felt that I could pretty much fill all of the other positions except for those.
Okay.
Just didn't have enough applicants in that realm with that qualification for the extraterritorial. I'm just wondering if we can't appoint what it is that council can be ready to appoint for tomorrow, so that commissions can get going with their new people or begin their calendar year, and hold off on Board of Adjustments if that's what we need to do in order to come up with candidates for it.
To Kathy's point, I mean, I feel like I can finish up my recommendations in the morning to provide them to John to aggregate. Do other folks feel like they'd be able to do the same?
I've already done that.
Bob, how do you feel?
What I may have a problem because I have some obligations that's going to obligate me most of the day up until 5:30 when I go to the TAC meeting, and then it's council meeting afterwards. I think, I mean, I've already made some suggestions to John, and certainly I'm willing to take a look at what other members have proposed. And I mean, I'm good with looking at what's been proposed, and I will contribute to the degree that I can. So we can appoint the ones that we can, and the ones we can't, we just bump it to the next meeting.
Well, the other option we may have is we're going to have some public hearings tomorrow. They're going to need a follow-up. And so we could punt those all the way to the 20th, but we could also do a special meeting some point before the end of June, and also add to the agenda on that boards and commissions, if that'd be amenable to council. That would give y'all an extra potential week or so to provide feedback to John and the team. Do you think that might work?
Let's get through tomorrow evening and do what we can, then we can decide from that point. I'm in a busy stretch of time here, and I'm just not so sure that I can commit it to anything right now. So
okay.
I believe some of the boards actually, with the combination of our efforts, can be filled tomorrow evening. I really think so. It looks like a Board of Adjustment may be the most difficult, but I did give John some names today with the P&Z and 3 or 4 of the others. In other words, I mean, I've I've done what I can do at this point, and probably 4 or 5 of the boards and commissions I've made nominations, and so I believe we can accomplish a lot tomorrow evening, to be honest.
Okay.
Are you available by phone tomorrow?
Me? Or-
Yeah,
I'm available anytime, yes.
thanks.
All right, so we will aim to have a discussion tomorrow evening and see how many boards and commissions we can knock out and table any that we are not ready on.
That will be good, because that way we can get some accomplished, and
Right.
and it looks like the board adjustment's going to really be the tough one in any event. And I will make one comment about the board of adjustment, and to follow up what Harold said and also Mike. That is that's very difficult. And those people, I know the School of Government offers the training on quasi judicial hearings, and that's training, for new board members and even members have been on there for a while. It's good to have that training, because this quasi judicial hearings, as you all know, is just like a court hearing, and you have evidentiary matters you have to work with, and that training they provide at School of Government is very beneficial. So in any event, I just throw that into the hopper, because and Mike can sort of crank it in, because even when we're recruiting people, we can, tell them we'll provide, get them signed up for that training. I think it would be helpful in any event for all of them to do that, because like I said, because of the evidentiary nature of the quasi judicial hearing, it's some training would be helpful.
Very good. Any other questions, comments on boards and commissions? Staff has been a lot of requests and conversations. Any items that you need us to clarify?
I don't think so. I think we can go back and look at the video if we have any more questions.
All right. I had 2 other items I wanted to bring up before we entertain David's request for a closed session. One, if you saw the news this weekend, we had a cyclist who was killed on South Church Street. And I know we've talked a lot about bike ped infrastructure. And I know Mike's talked and presented about kind of the challenges presented by the Church Street corridor. And I would like at a future work session to kind of look at that more comprehensively. I know we're chipping away with some multi-use and some sidewalk along there wherever we can. But the way our community is laid out, the east-west, the most efficient route is Church Street. And so we can do all the work we want to create alternative parallel routes. But ultimately, we have folks who need to get to work and need to get to where they need to in our community and need to use the Church Street corridor. And I'd really like to have a conversation about how we make sure that's a corridor that is safe for all users of it. And there are a lot of people who use that corridor that don't have a car. I think the most visible way that I remember seeing that is every time we get a snowstorm, I used to go out there and look at the side of the road in the grassy area where the snow was, and you could see just dozens and dozens of footprints of people walking through the snow along the side of Church Street, where we didn't have sidewalks and other infrastructure. And it gave you this visible kind of track of who was using that corridor. And so out of respect for the individual who lost their life, and kind of as looking forward in the planning of our community as we get denser and have more people moving along that prime corridor, I'd like for us to keep it front and center as we look at how we make sure that's a safe corridor for everyone. Council, does that sound reasonable for staff to bring us something in the next few months? I know there's a lot of plans and stuff already out there, but to kind of bring it together in one conversation, I think would be helpful.
Sounds good to me. I'd like to see it made safe for people in automobiles too.
Well, I think anytime you really plan for all the uses, you effectively help all the uses be safer. When
right.
you give people a dedicated area for bike ped, like what we've done on Vaughn Road, I think is a great example with the separated bike lane. And so now you don't have that interaction, that friction between different uses that creates people trying to merge around a bicycle and cut people off. And then make safer for everyone. We want everyone to get home at the end of the day.
To help staff out, can you give us a little better idea of what you're looking for us to bring back?
So I think again, in previous conversations and when we've talked about bike ped, when we've talked about like what Twin Lakes was doing along the corridor, we've had presentations and discussions about what pieces of infrastructure are sketched out and need to be built. So like when Twin Lakes has to give us do a multimodal path, or when we're doing a link transit stop or a DOT street widening and we talk about where we want sidewalks. So maybe to have kind of an idea of what the overlay looks like all the way down the corridor, and kind of what gaps still remain, and what opportunities are on the horizon. Obviously DOT always brings around some widening projects here and there. And there's discussions at different stages, but how do we make sure that corridor is a seamless multimodal corridor at some point in the future? And are there areas that will require further study? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. We can get something back for discussion.
And then the last item, this one's real quick. So nationally, the opioid settlement is starting to see funds get allocated down. I believe North Carolina had 17 cities with populations 75,000 and up who were allocated settlement funds directly. Burlington obviously is not that big, so we didn't make that list. But in our area, I believe Alamance County will be directed some of the opioid settlement funds to create new drug abuse and recovery services. And I'd love for us to just kind of keep an eye to that and an eye to opportunity. I know that's something our council's brought up before as something we want to be vigilant on. And so to see with those funds, there's also some guidance coming as far as best practices and programs. And I'd love to see kind of if we could do an analysis of where does our community match up as far as already doing some of those best practices and where are the gaps? And then how can we help support our county health department and our local providers in encouraging meeting those best practices as those federal funds through the settlement come down? Because I know that's something a lot of our residents care very deeply about. Many people's lives have been touched by addiction. And so how can we make sure those funds get best applied in our community to help our residents?
Can you give me an example of that, Mr. Mayor? Because that seems out of our lane.
I think it's, so we right now will do some of our CDBG funds to things like Ralph Scott, which is treatment facilities and helping folks get back on their feet. And then through this pandemic, we've realized that we had a role to help out the county health department when they've ended up kind of, they only have so much depth of staffing. And so there are opportunities where we can work collaboratively with other partners like the county health department, like those nonprofit players, to make sure that services are accessible and that we can plug gaps where we can. So just to keep an eye towards the fact that this is a huge national settlement that is providing funds into the drug recovery system. And so how do we make sure that we help kind of the whole system best leverage that?
What are those funds? What do those funds go to? Are they not going to the county, to the public health part of the county or mental health?
So this is what I'd like a staff report on to better understand. I've gotten some preliminary stuff that I've pulled off the internet, but I think it'd be really interesting to see how those funds may play out in our community locally. Because even if they go to the county, so they're going to go to local providers who are in the Burlington city limits, and they're going to benefit our residents.
Sure.
This is a topic that, I mean, it impacts our police, it impacts our community services, it impacts transit. So for us to be aware of what's coming and what's changing, it helps us better plan for all the things we do as a city. And then it helps us be a team player in a collaborative environment. And I know I get asked about it by residents all the time about drug abuse and drug use in our community. I assume y'all get similar questions. So just for us to keep an eye to it and be fully informed, since this is not a normal thing to happen, to have a giant settlement like this. I mean, it's akin to the tobacco settlements decades ago, and what those funds did to change our society. So just want to put that out there. So as more information comes available and staff feels comfortable bringing us a report, I assume the league will provide some information. I know former Chair Lazara was very passionate about this topic, and now he's Senator Lazara. So I think there'll be some good resources and good conversations statewide, but just for us to be tuned into that and aware of it. So that was my last item. Council, any other items before David tells us about our closed session? All right, now it's your turn, David.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd ask the council to go into a closed session at this time pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11 A3 and C to consider and give instructions to legal counsel concerning the handling or settlement of claims and judicial actions. Jennifer Marquis versus City of Burlington, Alamance County Superior Court, case 20 CVS 1689. Cindy Lackey and John Lackey versus City of Burlington, 21 CVS 002. And Sarah Lindley versus City of Burlington, Alamance County Superior Court, 20 CVS 1354.
David, can I ask a question before we vote on this? If we're going to go into closed session for that, if I wanted to also go into closed session to discuss a personnel matter, could we do that simultaneous with two motions?
Yes, you can. You can do that. Hold on just a minute. That would be 143-318.11 A6.
So we'd vote on one, then make a motion, vote on that one.
Yes, you can do it separately. I guess you can put them together if you like.
I thought it could all be one combined motion. So just
Let's make, I would make that motion at David's request for the legal piece and mine for the personnel, given those two statutes that you just read.
So it's a combination motion, right?
Correct.
A3 and A6, David, right?
Correct.
So moved.
all right. Motion to enter closed session as spelled out, made by Councilmember Butler, seconded by Councilmember Ward. Any questions regarding the motion to enter closed session? All those in favor, please say aye and indicate with a hand raise.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion is passed with votes for myself, Mayor Pro Tem Hikes, Councilmembers Ward, Butler, and Owen. Council will now leave this Zoom meeting and enter a closed session. We will return to this Zoom meeting to close the meeting once we're done with our. Council members, you should have access to the Zoom details in your email.
As I know.
You didn't click that on.
All right, looks like we should be getting folks in right now. Bob, you made it.
Yeah, I did.
Lost? Like,
It wasn't easy, though.
No, that,
all right. So do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion since I'm here.
Thank you, Bob. Do I hear a second? All right.
Second.
So we should be getting folks in. There's officially, since it's now being recorded, there's a motion to adjourn made by Councilmember Ward, seconded by Councilmember Butler. All those in favor to adjourn, please say aye and indicate with a hand raise.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, council is adjourned. We'll see everyone 7 p.m. tomorrow evening. Thank you very much, everyone.
Have a good evening, guys.
Adjourn.
I'll make that motion since I'm here.
Thank you, Bob. Do I hear a second? All right. So we should be getting